He's the one who got the camera. I did not.
It's okay. It's way up high. It's okay.
They are short. They're short. Tell you a little bit about some of the differences. Not
Hold
many.
it. Hold it closer, Don.
Okay. When I met John in July 4th, 1963, at the home of David. This way. Oh! Oh, before we get into any of that, anything else I wanted to say, and I have it all written down right here. That is, in the initial announcement of this affair, the state was making I plan to have a party, which was not quite right. I had thought about it and wondered, where am I going to do this? I don't want a church. John wasn't religious. That would not be good. The Art Institute was a good idea, but there's no place to socialize afterwards. Anyway, Barbara says, I happened to talk to Barbara about that. She said, Don, I want to do the party. And I said, oh okay, that's fine. So everything was turned over to Barbara, and Barbara found a corporal and her staff, and all the people who helped her are the ones who put this thing together. And they should be given the credit for it. Her staff, with herself and David, of course, Sidney Caney, Sue Haynes, Joanne Greenway, Karen Hageman, her husband, and her two sons, Curtin and Danny, Jane Hutchison, Barbara Trick, Courtney Wheeler, Marshall Goodman, and Kirsten Frank. So I really want to thank all of them. Barbara asked me a couple days ago, yesterday, in fact, she says, Don, how many do you think will be here? I said, I have no idea how many will be here. I just have no idea how. I don't know. We put up like enough chairs, and that's about it. Anyway, back to our trips. When John and I got together, we decided very early on that was fine, except that our work came first, always. Work first, then pleasure. Well, that developed into 10 years before we took a vacation, because I was working very long hours and so was he. And our first vacation was a short trip to San Francisco for a weekend. We visited an old friend there. Then a couple of years later, we took a really wild, we went to Puerto Rico. I remember that was over Christmas holidays. And we ate Christmas Eve dinner on the curb of Colonel Sanders because it was closed. But then our first real trip abroad, out of the country, was a trip that we both took to Spain. Yeah, Spain was the next one. And that was wonderful because I got to meet a lot of John's parents, a lot of John's relatives, I should say. And I saw a country which I never thought I would like, and I loved Spain. It was just wonderful. Then our next trip was a trip to Italy. Italy's. That was a trip to, it was Paris. We had a Paris trip in there somewhere. Our first trip to Paris, and we spent a week in Paris. And then the next was to Italy, and that was to Rome, first of all. Well, John was teaching in Sicily. I knew in Sicily, and I was to meet him in Rome. And I had been through Rome the year before on a business trip, and there was a counter there that I told him in the terminal, I'll meet you there. So, well, I went in. I flew in from U.S. and he was already there from Sicily, and lo and behold, when I got into the lobby, the counter was no longer there. It was now closed off and was an international flight. So where in the devil was John? So I got to look around and saw a sign that said for domestic flights. And it took me to another airport, a small airport. And I wandered around there for a while. I finally found him in the basement. He wondered where in the hell I'd been. But anyway, that was the beginning of a wonderful, wonderful time. I'd never been to Rome. Rome really captured me. It was really wonderful for me, every aspect of it. And then we went on to Florence. Yeah, Florence next. And it was wonderful. But then we got through Florence and we went to Venice. John had never been to Venice. I had been there once before, again on a business trip. And we went on the train. He got off the train station. He says, "This doesn't look so great." I said, "Wait till you turn the corner," because he had not seen the Grand Canal yet. Well, when we turned the corner, you should have seen him. He really dropped. But of all the cities we visited, Venice, I think, was the one he loved the most. He wanted to go back there again. Anyway, the next trip was Prague. Is it Prague? Yeah, Prague, Budapest, and what's the Spanish city on the coast? Barcelona. Yeah, Barcelona. No, that wasn't that. That was another trip. Another trip. Prague and somewhere else. Anyway, that was a great trip too. We had a good time on that trip. But then we went to Barcelona, Venice, and in Barcelona. We wound up in Barcelona. That was great too, because we took a trip on the Rhine. Anyway, there were various other small trips that we've taken, always in the United States. A lot of trips to New Orleans, one to Albuquerque, several to Savannah and Charleston. Those are our two favorite cities. Anyway, we had a great time all this time, and I want you to enjoy looking at his pictures. He had three great passions as far as his pictures were concerned, and you will notice. They were passions of him with dogs, big dogs, period, and other people with big dogs. And then the garden came in maybe a fourth choice, because he was always puttering in the garden. And then, anyway, that's all documented in his photos too. And the dogs are always bigger than he was. That pretty well takes care of my talks about John. We had a wonderful time together. Not all of us, before I forget though, I want to, Barbara asked, what if people want to give something toward his memory? And I suggested that there be a fund set up in his memory, and I'll read what has been set up. In July 2015, Jon Rodriguez, Donald Hageman, John's partner, established a revolving fund to be administered through the pre-professional ballet company Gem City Ballet for helping young men in the Mountain Valley region become professional ballet dancers. We had always said when we watched it, it's too bad Barbara doesn't have male dancers. She always had to hire them. And we said Barbara needs male dancers. John was known for someone who promoted and inspired and supported young male dancers. The fund will help to offset costs incurred by serious young pre-professional men seeking professional status. The fund will help pay for pre-professional company fees, money to attend ballet competitions, money for summer study, and for master classes. The fund is available to any young man in the Mountain Valley region. The dancers do not need to be with Gem City Ballet. The dancer and his family need to be committed to the young man's career choice. The dancer needs to be a serious student, taking 5 or more classes a week. The dancer needs to be physically and mentally suited for a ballet career. The fund will be part of Gem City Ballet, a not-for-profit 501c3 organization, and donations will be deductible. Donations being sent to Gem City Valley, 220 commercial ways, Springfield Pike. Please include Rodriguez funds in the memo line. Or if you want to get Dave to contribute something, that's what the little blue box is for. Now, this other box, I'm going to let Bert say now. Tell you what it's for. All of our lives, we've had the Seidels as great friends. I don't know where we met them. I don't know where. I have no idea whether it was a piano performance, a ballet performance, might have been both. Anyway, we've had them as friends for a long time, and we dearly love them. I told Barbara I was going to ask Bert to MC this little affair, and she said that's a good idea. So we called him, and Bert was out of town, no, he was out of the house. So Alice answered for him and said yes, he would do it. So anyway, it's a great pleasure to introduce Bert Seidel. Thank you.
It's so heartwarming to see everyone here and to see that 88.5% of the people here are better looking than I ever was, and 98.3% are more talented than ever I was. You know, there's something about dance and the arts that brings out the best in people and the best people. And when I think about the best people, we automatically think about a name that links with another name that is forever linked in this little box that is supposed to contain the remains for eternity. But you know what's for eternity? The eternity is right here. This is a memorial service. Memorial time to remember Jon Rodriguez. You can't remember John without Don. You can't remember Don without John. But I defy anybody here who thinks they can ever forget Jon Rodriguez. You know, I don't know where we met, both of you. You sort of came out of the woodwork, I think. And we just became dear friends. They needed someone who had no talent at all. In fact, I have to register a small complaint with my dear Barbara, who I adore. None of the costumes are my color, and none of them fit me.
They don't fit anybody.
So I would come here and put on a flashing costume and pretend I was a dancer. Well, another dream down the John. At any rate, that's a mild complaint. It's a thrill. It's a thrill to be here with you all. It's a thrill to remember John and to remember the wonderful friends. And I think that everybody sitting here knows that they are John and Don's special friend. There's no contest. There's plenty of room. These two guys were love personified. They not only danced and created music and prepared people to dance and prepared people for music, but they built a house and they decorated the house in the most eclectic and amazing thing. And visiting their house in the early days, you never know where to go in. Sometimes the entrance is on the second floor. Yeah. Sometimes the entrance is subterranean. But we always got in there, and we always found new rooms. They were the same rooms, but they looked completely new. And we realized that these two guys were absolutely perfect for each other, and they were so similar. And the only difference is that Don is a hell of a much better cook. John. At any rate, just to show you what great artists and pedagogues they were, and how discerning they were about the arts. None of them ever suggested that I dance or play the piano. Neither did Miss Jo. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, the kids in the neighborhood all went down to what is now their house for ballet lessons. And some of the little girls in the neighborhood and a couple of the guys, and they went into the room and they came out. And I went into the room and Miss Jo said, do this, do this, do this. She took me by the hand and came out, handed me to my mother and said, let him play baseball. So, with all these talented dancers, all these theater people, I must call attention to Joe Deere, who last night became a member of the Dayton Theater Hall of Fame. Much deserved. That was just last night. I'm a little disappointed he didn't wear his medal. But, so we have luminaries here. In all of our relationships, we did contribute a dancer. Our daughter Beth, a disciple of John, Bess, and Miss Jo, and she clung to her relationship with John throughout until John was gone, and it will remain. When Beth went off to dance with Joffrey and was disenchanted and left Joffrey and went to college, John was her buoying spirit. When she became disenchanted with college, which was about every third week, John found her places to teach dance and places to dance. And I'm sure that in order to keep the communication going, there was two soup cans and a string between Boston and Dayton. At any rate, Beth has written a few words about John, which I'm sure, I know they reflect Alice's and my deep love for John and for Don. And I think that they will help all of us, because Beth, among her other talents, is a writer. A few words about John by Beth Seidel. Jon Rodriguez, dancer, choreographer, teacher, mentor, above all, an inspiration. I was somewhere around 5 years old when I started sports school with a dance. Miss Jo, our beautiful Miss Bess, and Mr. John were in charge. I don't know exactly when the switch was turned on for me, but once it did, pirouettes and arabesques and perfect port de bras were pretty much all I could think about. John was a huge part of that young life. I will never forget the ways in which he encouraged me, the flair and flourish with which he held his hands in mine and held me in his hands and arms. The buoyance, the command of his step, the tank tops and the goatee, and the timbre of his voice. Yeah, those are beautiful things you can't forget. He taught me to dance tall as I was not, to hear the music as if it were alive in the room, and to enchant and engage the audience with just a tilt of the head and a certain gleam in the eye. In those days, he sometimes said I looked too young for this part or that, something I hated then but wouldn't mind hearing now, nearly 4 decades later. So much of his work resonates. I can still reenact the opening sequence of Homage to George Friedrich. For one, I remember the ballet. Beth remembers the ballet. Alice remembers the ballet. Barbara. I can feel the thrill as the overture swells. I think that he would be happy to know, and perhaps he does, strike that perhaps and make that he certainly does, that moving through the air remains essential. I will think of him often as I persevere in defiance of age and odds. I will sit along for Jean, and like all of us, I will miss his extraordinary presence. Beth Seidel. fortunately, we have this wonderful venue, and I know so many here have similar, equal, better stories. And I am inviting you to come and take this microphone. By the way, this moment with the microphone signifies Don's move into the 21st century. You know, do you have a cell phone, John? No. Well, he doesn't. He has it, but he doesn't use it. That's like the definition of a gentleman, someone who plays the viola but chooses not to. At any rate, please, will one of you lovelies step up and tell us what you would like to tell us about Jon? Wait a minute, this is beyond a love letter. There are two ladies who have done so much for Jon and Don, and they're the two Barlows. One of them is right here, one of them is back there. So, with one kiss,
I don't know if I'll do too well for that. This is good, bad, 21st century, okay. As many of you know, I'm Barbara Trick, and I work with Jon at State Ballet for a number of years, and also when he had his own studio. And I'd like to share just a few really personal memories. I'm not going to talk about his professional accomplishments, because others need to have that, but I'll share a few personal memories. And Jon had the best sense of humor. He always made me laugh. Whenever we talked, he laughed about something. Even when I visited him in the last days of his life, we laughed. And that is what I will hold on to from our 45 years of friendship. Now, others, as I say, will tell you about Jon's talents as a choreographer and a teacher. They will well know. But I will tell you, in the Dayton Ballet days, we traveled every year to craft choreography conferences and ballet festivals, and Jon would present his ballets and teach and choreograph. Others attending these events envied me because I knew Jon. And finally, very personally, I want to say that I met Jon when I was 19, and I was interested in art and architecture, old houses, gardening, literature. I didn't know many people that I could share these interests with. So when I met Jon and Don Hagen, a new world opened for me. So I will say, Jon, thank you. Thank you. Knowing you has made my life very rich.
may I offer this magic wand to...
I have some stories.
People have sent me stories on Facebook, and so this one's from Heidi Stevenson, and I'm pretty sure everyone in the room who has danced with Jon will empathize with this. Hi Barbara, I have two fond memories of Jon that you can use. The first is the time I was the only student to show for class on a day when we had a lot of snow. Jon said he'd go ahead and run me through the class. I walked in thinking, woohoo, a 2-hour private with Jon. But after about 45 minutes, I was regretting my decision to be diligent that day. At the end of class, he spent most of his time with his face in his hands saying, oh, Heidi. That was dreadful, and the quintessential, do it again. It was the most difficult class, but so rewarding, and I'm still glad I did it. The second is Jon and Miss Geraldine. When I danced with Jon, he was in the Insty Prince building on Ludlow Street, and we shared space with Geraldine's school. We'd be in the throes of a beautiful ballet combination at the bar, and all of a sudden there would be these earthy drum sounds from the next studio. Jon would just sigh and head for the door crying, Geraldine, enough! We loved their interaction. They were hilarious. Wish I could be here this weekend, but we are stuck here for another week at least. Hope to see you very soon, and please drink a toast to Jon for me. Best, Heidi. And the next one is from Scott Nielsen. So terribly sorry to hear of Jon Rodriguez's passing.
I worked with Miss Beth Saylor many years ago, mostly in Annapolis, when she went to teach and set ballets for Carl and Colette Hoffman. But I also came to Dayton for classes with her. This was back in the mid to late 70s. I would very much like to send her a note, but I only have an old snail mail address on Dayton Liberty Road. I'll make sure if you have a birthday. But anyway, thank you, and our condolences to all of John's family there. Godspeed. And then finally, Sam Meredith sent a performance photo from the 1989 WSU dance concert. John created Bushido on me and my partner, Lori Weaver, who is here. It was the first ballet that was ever choreographed on me. Being in the studio with Mr. Rodriguez and such a beautiful partner is time that I will never forget. Unfortunately, I cannot attend the memorial on Sunday, but I will be there in spirit and watching on Facebook. Much love to all of you, Sam Meredith. And that ballet is on that video there. Thank you.
My name is I don't know if you said I'm the rest. Can you hear me? John is my uncle and Dad is our uncle, and we love him so much. He was a huge part of our life. Always. And growing up, I was so proud of him. I used to in Bowden in school. First one that loves like to do the theater just right with a like work with such great choreographers. Is Jon Rodriguez. Sorry. But I have a million memories because we was just weird. I mean, it was her and we loved him and he was such a huge part of our life. But the funniest memory to me is I used to go with him to his ballet school when he came to town to teach. I'd go with him, always thought I'm going to go with him. So he would take me and I'd love, I was just amazed by how beautiful the dancers were and stuff. So every Friday back, I would tell him that I wanted to be a ballet dancer and he would just say, you don't have to get the spring shoulder. Everyone in our family knows why I said that because I was not decent, but I recommended him I did it. No, you should do some other and then I did fly dance, but his whole life, he's such an amazing person, and you're such an amazing person, and your love is so amazing, and I just always look up to him for being everything he was, and stepping out into the world when he did the choices he made, and forever, he's love him, I love you guys.
Somehow after Bert started talking, batteries ran down. I don't know why. I'm going to change those. That's okay.
All right, anyone else just hold it? Okay, I've been blessed to know John in many forms over the years. He's been a teacher, choreographer, and mentor for me, but I'll talk about that later. I was so blessed to have him as a friend. John and Don were the first people I invited over for a fancy dinner party when I first got my first apartment. And the lamb and rice were completely overdone because our cheap wine opener snapped off in the bottle. And then Scott and Don had to drill it out with a drill bit. And I thought, oh my God, they're never going to come to dinner again. And they did, thankfully, and they brought us a new wine opener the second time they came. I'm so glad they did. Dinner at what John lovingly referred to as Shea Robbins. became something to look forward to every other weekend or so. And both John and Don really inspired Scott and I. Here was an amazing couple, and they were amazing artists and individuals, and they had been together for 40 years when we first started being around them. They traveled the world. They had so many great stories to tell, and they never told the same one twice. And their relationship always seemed so easy. And they were the couple we wanted to be. And we still strive to be. John was a person that never came out really and told you how he felt about you. He showed you, and that meant so much more. And I appreciate that. I met John when I was 15 years old at a dance festival, ballet festival, and it just finished having class with Jeff Gerbler. And he asked me who the next person on the schedule was. And I said, Jon Rodriguez. And his whole face lit up. And he said, that was my teacher. And I want to go and watch that class with you. And it was kind of funny for me because as 15 years old, you don't really realize your teachers had teachers. So here comes John, this small man with this amazing smile, perfect turnout, perfect technique. It was just amazing. And it was one of the most challenging and rewarding classes I ever had. So 2 years later, when my teachers, including Jeff, were just so upset with me because I didn't want to continue dancing, even though I'd been offered contracts to do so, Jeff sat down and said, please, please don't quit. Please, please go to Wright State and study under John. And if anybody can bring the love of dance back into your life, that would be him. And I never even heard of Wright State. I never even knew where it was located. I didn't know anything about it, but I remember that class. And I remember that I had loved it, and I decided to give it a shot. And I'm so glad I did. He was just amazing. And 4 years later, after I had gone to Wright State, I had the same problem. I'm sitting there, and I talked to John, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't think I want to dance professionally. And he said, well, let's talk about it. And so we did, and he listened. And I told him my concerns, and in the end, he told me something that would become my personal mantra and lifelong pursuit. He said to me, if you really think the world of dance needs to be more positive and constructive, don't wait. Go and be that positive change. And just like that, John gave me my future and the purpose of all I would be. I would be a ballet teacher.
Now we hear from
Rodriguez is my maiden name, and Jon, obviously, is my uncle. Jon was my uncle. And my dad, Rodriguez, is here, and my brother, Mark, and our significant others, my sister-in-law, Deb, and Lisa Rodriguez. And we have a lot of Lisa Rodriguez's in our family. And Allison and Renee, and then, of course, we've got, heard from Julie, like, well, Nicole, and Linda, and Lauren, and Benny. Anyways, what I wanted to share with you is that back in the early 80s, my daughter wanted, well, I won't say she wanted. I always wanted my kids to have something to do with the arts as well as with sport. And I didn't know where to go, but I remember tap dancing down at the neighbor's house when I was 3 years old, when we lived in Highland Park on Hill 3rd. So I searched out for a ballet class that she could go to that might be in the neighborhood and we could afford to send her to. So we went to Deborah Chase School of Dance, and she worked out of her basement. And after I got to know her for a while, she realized that I was Jon Rodriguez's niece. And she says, you know, he taught me, I studied under him. And I says, wow, this is a small world. Now we're talking Westland, Michigan, which is where I grew up, okay, which is about 30 miles west of Detroit. And I just thought it was a great thing. And then when we went to her recital, I mean, I couldn't believe out of a small basement and as many classes as she had, and all the different dance styles, the jazz, the ballet, the ones who were older did the, what do you call it, the toe? Anyhow, so my daughter was there for, from about 6 years old to 12 years old. And she decided to move on. But anyhow, Deborah Chase has a larger school now, not in a basement. And she puts on a huge, wonderful program. And I know my uncle, if he was ever in town, I would have had him come. But it isn't the case because he had his life and he had his work. And his work was really important. The artistic part of Uncle Jon and his father, and my father, and my brother, and my niece, or my cousins, and with some of my nephews and my nieces. I mean, we all have, or most of us have, not me, most of us have artistic abilities of one kind or another. And anyhow, I just wanted to share that with you because it's, you know, it's because he was down here, because he's around the world, boy, he was so close to home and didn't know it, you know. And the other thing I want to leave you with, which is a little chuckle because I was thinking about this. I remember Uncle Jon leaving my mom and dad's house in Westland many years ago. He had a real small car and a real bad dog. And if you can imagine, and Uncle Jon was a real small man. Okay, he fit the persona of ballet. You know, ballet was his artistic, is what he pursued artistically. And when they were leaving, I looked in the car and I swear I only saw the dog. Only the dog, and I think the dog was in the back seat, but I wasn't sure there was a back seat. So I thought that was pretty funny when Don was talking about the dogs, and I'm looking at all the pictures and I'm saying, yes, and the big dogs, and the greyhounds, and this, that, and the other, and I just thought that was a great, great remembrance. And he always thought a lot of his family, a lot of his brother, a lot of his sister who passed, gosh, 30-some years ago, and of his mother who lived to 101 plus years. So, there is longevity in this life. And, but you know what? If you live it out the way you want and the way you dream, you go for your dreams, you shoot for the stars, and you'll land on eagle's wings. And that's been my motto for a long time. So thank you.
You know, he appreciates this because I know we have a large agenda, but this is a political period, if you haven't noticed. Let's do a quick poll. Everyone who has danced with Jon, raised by Jon, has been influenced and danced by Jon, please stand up. Look at that, what a thrill. What a thrill. Also, Don and Jon are life partners, Bess and Jon are dancers.
We're so fortunate to know Jon and Don. I have just two things because I know people want to talk about beautiful classes you gave us and all the beautiful ballets and dances you gave us. I'm so grateful. I can thank you. And then there's Bert and everybody who's been supporting us all this time, and Barbara's beautiful costumes, and Barbara Potter-Corvo and everybody that got this group together. You're holding the torch for the arts in this culture, and I am so grateful. John and I are so grateful, and I'm very honored that Don brought so many beautiful pianists in our community. I just wanted to say one more thing. Don and John believed in the human expression of the human condition, which would, in my terms, would be called modern dance, and then in the purity of classical ballet, which is the beauty of spiritual perfection and grace. And he and Don believed in both of those expressions, which I feel are so important. The human condition and the modern dance and the beauty of ballet. We are so lucky in this community. I thank all of you.
My mother, two college graduates, twins. Can you believe that?
Thank you. My name is Laura Craftingers, and I was a Dayton Ballet dancer. I taught at the Dayton Ballet School, and I also taught at the state. Karen Russo-Burke, who is the current Dayton Ballet director, has asked me to read a letter to Dawn because she can't be here today. Dear Dawn, it is with heartfelt sympathy that I would like to extend my condolences to you, as losing a lifelong partner is so unfathomable. As two creative artists supporting each other over the years, your bond with Jon was on a level that most cannot conceive. Jon's presence at the Dayton Ballet was a passionate one from the beginning. The studio was where he belonged, whether teaching or creating, it never wavered. The many dancers that felt that passion will be forever grateful for having been there to experience it. I only met Jon towards the end of his career, but I cannot forget the twinkle in his eyes and that crooked smile that always accompanied him. He was always willing to sit and talk about dance, dancers, music, or film. You could see that having worked with Miss Jo, with her drive to have all of her students study all of the arts, was also instilled in his methods as well. The Dayton Ballet was very fortunate to perform Jon's ballet with Shudo for our 75th anniversary. The last time I spoke with Jon was when I went over to get the costumes for the piece. Yours and Jon's home is a magnificent museum of a life filled with love and the beauty of your passions. On behalf of myself and the Dayton Ballet, I want to wish you, Dawn, peace and strength for the future, and may you forever be consoled by fond memories and supported by the love of those around you. Sincerely, Karen.
Bert, I've forgotten what a wonderful master of ceremonies you were for all those years at the opera that I remember. Maybe all of that. Jon was the first male dance teacher I ever had. His fiery Spanish flair became the icon in my mind. Forever, of what a male dancer could be. My first ballet teacher, Dale Smith, is here. He was a required course at Wright State for theater, and I fell in love with dance instead of acting. And I don't know if Dawn and Jon knew at the time, but I was on a terribly low rank. If roadkill was warm, we were grateful. And that's the truth. And I had never worn shoes in the summer until I got to Wright State. But I had strong feet. And when I wanted to dance, John gave me a scholarship to school, as did Miss Joe. And I studied with Miss Bess, and I studied with Barbara. And if I ran real fast from the school at the Victoria Theater, I could get to John's class, but I had to run. I could get there on time to the Geraldine London School where John was teaching. And then later, Don picked me up and discovered I had more talent for music than for dance. And he arranged for singing lessons for me. And I was in their house every Tuesday for how many years, I don't know. And they were a family of parenting me who didn't have family that could understand what I was trying to become. And without them, I don't know what I would have done, because I was meant for something, but I didn't even know what it was. And they were so good to pick up this little kid and recognize something and help him. And now I'm a student, a dance student who's in the Paul Taylor Dance Company touring the world. Another dance student of mine danced in the Vienna Festival Ballet. Another student of mine is teaching acting at the Netherlands Circus School. This is passing on. And so it does pass on with gratitude, Dawn, also to you, and the love that you and John shared, that it passed on to me and to so many. Thank you.
Here's a real world but as we're winding our agenda down, this box, they say I made it, but it appears. The concept and the design comes from heaven, from our son David, and the impetus behind it is love. And it's with an honor and a pleasure that I dedicate this to you, Don, and to John, and to all of us here, to remember that we will never forget, and we will always keep you in our hearts. And Mark, as a traveler of highest repute, I'm giving you the Schwanengezang. This is the swan song.
This will be pretty tough. I spoke with some friends last night. Mr. Neil Ross. I spoke to Mr. Jeffrey earlier this week. Elizabeth is out here with us today, and Shelley is, all of which danced with me in July. Here's.
I just brought her up here from the heart, so you go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. So, a lot of things came in, as we were talking, just a lot of same things came up. Mentor, supporter. Camille was saying that big hugs. And that Miss Joe, Miss Bess, and John, they were always on our side. They wanted us to succeed. They could find in us what we couldn't. They found a way to pull it out. He was the father figure to all of us because he began to know us. We were a small enough company at that time that he knew who we were, what we were doing, what we were going through. And boy, you could tell when we were having a lazy day. Because do you remember, if it was a lazy day, it was a Allegro day, it was he doesn't care what you did before. And he said, right, am I right? Oh boy, we had those terms and those Allegro combinations, and I think he did it on purpose. He would love to go out and teach, and when he could find the lazy students, out came those Allegro combinations. And Camille was saying that she had never seen a man that could do a combination with his hands and then just turn right around and do it just as fast and go, and how old are you? And he could still do it. Shelley said that he was an influence on her teaching style down at Southern Mississippi State University. And for me, I have a different profession now, but I do have things that I carry with me from John. And one of those is like a 60-year-old Ford standing So I just kind of wanted to let you know that some of the people that are not here today all seem to have the same thing. And I was a pachinko ball. John knew me, bouncing around. He knew how to calm me down. And poor Shelley, Tarantella, oh my Lord, have mercy. You know, he would make me do it 3 and 4 times before he would say I was ready to do it. And Shelley, my partner, stood right beside me, and she did it full out every single time. And it wasn't exactly the easiest piece, was it? And
You're asking me about it.
I know, and you and Miss June and Beth were there, because I got to dance with your daughter, I certainly did. And I like Miss Beth's phrase, that he was like working with a painter. He choreographed right in front of you, right before your eyes. His brushes and strokes were his movements, and we were always trying to keep up with those movements. We were his canvas, blank, young, and ready to please, challenged to our potential extent, because we didn't know what it was, he did. And that he felt art, as always, was at its highest and most meaningful. And that his phrase, our most dreaded phrase, was, one more time. One more time. But that he had praise in all of us. And his praise for us was his smile. I've written something. My friend has gone home. Time together is done for now. But I believe that we will share time again. A cup of coffee, a glass of wine, maybe a cup. Tales of the adventures we shared and the ones to be. I believe that our time was good and we grew together from learning together. He was a great teacher and a gentle person. A man who saw what we did not and knew when to let us find it for ourselves. A touch here, a tug there, and a kind word of support to give him what he saw and wanted. Today I think of my friend and his new adventures to share with others. And I know that one day, he will tell me of these new adventures and ask me to join him once again. And until that day, I'll go out and find my adventures to tell him of and wait to see that smile, that twinkle, and hear that laugh. And until that day, I will move as I was taught, standing straight, hips forward, shoulders back, and I move into the night. And I want him to know he's just around the corner. And John, all is well.
I really am here just to read something from Jeff Riddler. But before I do that, I want to just say a few words. And yes, I am going to read them because I'm not doing so well today. I danced with Dayton Ballet from 1976 to 1980. I was a member of the last group of dancers that were under the direction of Mr. John and Miss Bess. I couldn't have imagined a better family to live my dance life with. I cherished every class and every step of choreography, and that stayed with me as I moved on to teaching in my own studio and choreographing with my own music. That to me is what is so wonderful about dance as an art form. The history of dance gets absorbed by every student, and then it gets passed on when they become a teacher. John will always be a part of every student that will ever be taught by those of us that knew him. Even his choreography lives on, not only in
his own pieces, but in the pieces his students created or will continue to create, because he shared his dance energy and his dance essence with us. And that's a pretty powerful legacy. The other blessing in all of this was that I got to see Jon on both sides of his life. I experienced him at his very best when I was his dancer. His vibrancy, his energy, his wit. He demonstrated every step in class, and he was never one to stand still. Later, I got to be with him when he was more vulnerable, no longer able to move his body in a way that his mind so wanted it to move. Being able to be there for that time, that became one of the greatest privileges in my life. I was able to give back to him a small part of the support that he gave to me. Again, another powerful and humbling experience. Now, as far as being chosen to lead Jeff's tribute, Jeff and I grew up together. He lived about 3 blocks from me. We started creating dances in the driveway from the moment that my sister-in-law met. The dance studio we went to didn't have classes for boys, so my older sister Dale suggested Schwartz Studio to his parents, and the rest, as they say, is history. Although Jeff and I never danced professionally together, he has remained one of my dearest and obviously oldest friends. I hope I can do his reading justice. Okay, here goes. Jon, in a word: teacher, idol, mentor, friend, no, magic, complete and total magic. I started ballet at Schwartz School of the Dance when I was 7 years old, in large part due to the wonderful woman Ms. Rodriguez. Modern on Tuesdays with Miss Hermine, and boys class on Friday with David McLean. Oh, how I loved it. Mr. McLean was a fascination for me. A boy could actually be a dancer. Wow. When I started year 2, Mr. McLean was suddenly gone, and this wiry little Spanish man was taking over. Mr. Jon, his name was, and in no time at all, I had forgotten all about Mr. McLean. I loved my new teacher, Mr. Jon. He was amazing. Little did I know. The years passed and I learned so much. Miss Jo gave me passion for all forms of dance and the history that had gone before us. Miss Bess made me dig so deep in my soul the guts that became a part of my whole life as a performer. But Jon was truly the one that made me believe that I could make it as a ballet dancer. And he pushed hard. How many times I heard the words, "Jeff, what are those ping pong paddles you call hands?" Or "Close your mouth, Ripley, you look like a dancing fish." And he made those roles for me that were so technically daunting and scary and fast. And he never thought for a moment that I couldn't make them all happen. He believed. Moreover, Jon was there in other ways. As a young man struggling with the emotions of realizing he was gay, Jon and Don were a shining example of what was possible in a then impossible world. Advice, an ear to listen, whatever I needed, Jon was there. I loved my dad more than anyone in the world. And he and Jon had an unspoken bond to make sure that I was okay in this world. They were united in supporting my dream. And when my dad died so suddenly when I was just 18, Jon was there. He became not only my artistic father, but also a sort of spiritual father for years to come. When I retired from Pennsylvania Ballet after 26 years of performing, Jon was in the audience. I talked to my own dad from behind a prop tree during the show, and I knew that my other father was in the house. At the party after, I presented Jon with a bouquet of flowers that the company had given me on stage. I might have had a career without Jon, but not the magical one that I actually had. He had believed, so I had believed. And there it is, magic. Yes, dear Jon, you were, you are, and you will always be magic. I will forever miss you and always be thankful that you were such a huge part of my life. I will be sentimental, but never sad, because the magic is in my soul, and I will spread our magic until I can't anymore. I love you, Mr. John, endlessly.
We have an opportunity for those unsaid thoughts. The box and there are papers and pens here. Please come up, write a message. It will stay with John and eventually with Don. Just as I love to stay there forever. And now we move the agenda. I've often heard that the short history of the Jewish people is they did terrible things to us, we beat them, let's eat. So, with that in mind, I'll come here, leave with the thoughts, and thank you for all of our hearts. And I've never been able to speak for Don, he speaks for himself. But I know that this day will live forever for us. Thank you all for being here.